The desert heat shimmered above the tarmac as Aaron Reeves stepped off the chartered helicopter, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder and his security clearance badge already feeling heavy around his neck. He'd signed 17 different non-disclosure agreements in the past week, each more ominous than the last, and still had no clear idea what Site-7 actually studied. The job posting had been vague: xenobiological research, government contract, competitive salary, remote location. Aaron had assumed it meant analyzing bacterial samples from Mars rovers or cataloging extremophiles from deep ocean vents. He was beginning to suspect he'd assumed wrong. The facility entrance looked like every other unmarked government building he'd ever seen: beige, brutalist, aggressively boring, but the security checkpoint featured retinal scanners, bone density analysis, and what his escort cheerfully called a neutrino scatter detector that apparently verified he wasn't carrying antimatter. Aaron laughed at what he thought was a joke. The guard didn't laugh back. His escort, a woman named Patricia with a tablet grafted to her hand and the demeanor of someone perpetually behind schedule, led him through corridors that descended deeper than should have been structurally possible. Aaron's ears popped twice. The walls transitioned from concrete to something that looked like burnished metal but felt warm to the touch, almost organic. Bioluminescent strips replaced fluorescent lights at the lower levels, casting everything in a soft blue glow that reminded Aaron uncomfortably of deep-sea footage. They passed laboratories where researchers in clean suits examined equipment Aaron couldn't begin to identify, rooms filled with computing arrays that hummed with enough processing power to make his head ache, and at one point, a window that looked into what appeared to be a perfectly contained miniature thunderstorm. Patricia noticed his stare and said, without slowing, "Atmospheric testing. Don't worry about it." Aaron added it to his growing list of things to definitely worry about. The briefing room smelled like recycled air and bad coffee. Dr. Helena Voss stood at the head of a conference table, her silver hair pulled back severely and her expression suggesting she'd already calculated exactly how much of a liability Aaron would be. 3 other researchers sat around the table, and Aaron felt their eyes evaluate him with the warmth of a tax audit. Voss didn't bother with pleasantries. Dr. Reeves. Xenobiology, UC Berkeley. Specialized in extremophile adaptation and cross-species communication modeling. You've never held security clearance above secret before, and your psychological evaluation suggests an unfortunately pronounced ethical sensitivity. She said it like a diagnosis. That makes you either perfect for this assignment or completely unsuitable. We'll know which within the month. Aaron settled into a chair, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Should I be flattered or concerned? Yes, Voss replied, and something flickered across her face that might have been amusement. She activated the room's holodisplay, and suddenly they were surrounded by a 3-dimensional schematic of the facility. Site-7 is home to the most significant xenobiological discovery in human history. 8 months ago, we acquired a living extraterrestrial specimen. She is the reason this facility exists, the reason you're here, and the reason everyone in this room has probably shortened their lifespan by a decade from stress. The display shifted, showing a containment cell that looked capable of holding a small spacecraft. Aaron's mouth went dry. She. The subject presents as female by human analogs. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, humanoid body plan with significant size variation. Subject Epsilon stands approximately 12 feet tall with proportional strength. We're still calculating. She's sapient, possibly more intelligent than baseline human, and has been in our custody since her craft experienced catastrophic failure over Nevada. Voss paused, her expression hardening. She is also the single most dangerous organism on this planet. Aaron studied the schematic, his mind racing through implications. Dangerous how? Aggressive? Toxic biology? Infectious? One of the other researchers, a man with the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much, laughed bitterly. Dangerous because we don't understand her, and what we don't understand, we fear. And what we fear, He stopped abruptly as Voss shot him a look. The subject has never displayed overt aggression, Voss continued smoothly. But containment protocols exist for reasons. She possesses capabilities we're still documenting, and her psychological state remains opaque despite 8 months of observation. Previous attempts at communication have been unproductive. Erin's ethical sensitivity, as Voss had called it, was already sending up warning flares. What kind of containment protocols are we talking about? Voss's pause lasted a fraction too long. You'll observe during your orientation. Dr. Reeves, your primary assignment is monitoring and behavioral documentation. You'll work rotating shifts in the observation deck. Do not attempt direct communication without authorization. Do not deviate from feeding schedules. Do not, under any circumstances, enter the containment cell without security escort and supervisor approval. Understood? Feeding schedules, Erin repeated slowly. Are we restricting her diet? The room's temperature seemed to drop. The haunted researcher looked away. Voss met Erin's eyes with the flat effect of someone who'd made peace with uncomfortable decisions. Nutritional management is part of our behavioral conditioning program. Controlled resource allocation promotes compliance and reduces potential threat response. It's been approved by both the ethics board and military oversight. Erin felt something cold settle in his stomach. Before he could respond, Voss was already moving toward the door. Come. You should meet her. The observation deck overlooked the containment cell through 6 inches of transparent aluminum, reinforced with what Patricia explained was a coherent photon lattice that could stop anything short of a tactical nuclear blast. Erin barely heard her. He was staring at the figure in the cell below. She sat in the center of the vast space, her back against the curved wall, and Erin's first thought was that she looked heartbreakingly human. Tall, impossibly tall, with long limbs and graceful proportions that made her seem like a sculpture of human form stretched toward some idealized dimension. Her skin held a faint luminescence, subtle enough he might have imagined it, and her hair fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple gray garment that looked uncomfortable and institutional. Then she turned her head, and Erin saw the ears. They swept back from her skull in elegant curves, longer than his forearm, taped. Erin's second week at Site 7 had taught him several important things. First, the coffee in the commissary tasted like it had been filtered through someone's gym socks, then refiltered through their disappointment. Second, the facility's artificial day-night cycle was precisely 17 minutes off from actual circadian rhythms, which explained why everyone looked vaguely seasick. Third, Subject Epsilon, he refused to think of her that way, but hadn't earned the right to call her anything else, was considerably smarter than anyone wanted to admit. He noticed it during his monitoring shifts. The way she'd arranged the sparse objects in her cell in different configurations each day, sometimes geometric patterns, sometimes something that looked almost like writing. The way her elongated ears would orient toward the ventilation system during shift changes, as if she'd memorized the facility's entire schedule by sound alone. The way she'd sometimes stop mid-movement and stare directly at the observation cameras, her expression unreadable but definitely pointed. Erin sat in the observation deck during a graveyard shift, the kind where the skeleton crew meant he was effectively alone with his thoughts and the omnipresent hum of life support systems. His tablet displayed biometric data from her cell, heart rate, respiration, thermal output, all carefully monitored and meticulously meaningless. The numbers told him she was alive. They didn't tell him she was starving. He'd reviewed the feeding protocols with growing horror. Twice daily rations of what the documentation called nutritionally complete substrate, which was a fancy way of saying gray paste that probably tasted like the commissary coffee smelled. Portion sizes calculated by a formula that assumed her metabolism worked like an oversized human's. Erin had a doctorate in xenobiology. He knew that assumption was about as scientific as reading tea leaves. Below him, she folded her thin blanket with meticulous care, smoothing out wrinkles that didn't exist. The gesture was so heartbreakingly domestic that Erin had to look away. When he looked back, she was tracing something on the floor with one long finger. Not random patterns this time. Deliberate marks that formed shapes, characters, maybe words in a language Earth had never seen. His tablet chimed softly. Feeding time. Aaron watched through the observation window as the automated delivery system opened a slot in the wall and dispensed her meal. She approached it without enthusiasm, without hope, with the mechanical compliance of someone who'd learned that resistance changed nothing. She ate slowly, and Aaron's trained eye caught the slight tremor in her hands that spoke of profound fatigue. Something in him snapped with an almost audible click. The commissary was deserted at 3 in the morning, which suited Aaron's purposes perfectly. He bypassed the gray paste dispensers and went straight for the actual food, the stuff they served to human staff. Fresh fruit from the hydroponics bay. Real bread. A protein bar that didn't taste like existential despair. He stuffed it all into a bag meant for laboratory samples and tried not to think about how many regulations he was about to violate. The corridors felt different at night, longer somehow, as if the facility itself was holding its breath. Aaron's badge gave him access to the containment level. He was cleared for observation, after all, but his hands shook as he pressed his palm to the biometric scanner outside her cell. The security system chirped its approval, and the outer door unsealed with a hiss that sounded uncomfortably like a sigh. The airlock between observation and containment felt like a confessional. Aaron stood there, clutching his bag of contraband fruit, and had a moment of pure clarity about how spectacularly his career was about to implode. Then he remembered those trembling hands, that careful folding of a too-thin blanket, and pressed the button to open the inner door. She was standing when he entered. Of course she was. Those ears had probably heard him coming from 3 corridors away. Aaron looked up at her, and up, and felt his prepared speech evaporate like water on hot concrete. She stood perfectly still, watching him with those vast, luminous eyes, and Aaron realized with a jolt that she was afraid. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, his voice embarrassingly squeaky. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I brought food. Real food. I thought you might like." He trailed off, feeling monumentally stupid. What was he doing? She probably didn't even understand English. She'd been here 8 months with 0 successful communication according to all the reports. He was just some idiot with an apple and a death wish for his career. Aaron set the bag down and slid it across the floor toward her, then backed away toward the door. She could have it. He'd leave. This was stupid anyway. He'd probably triggered every security alert in the facility. She moved so quietly for someone her size. One moment she was standing at the far end of the cell, the next she was crouching beside the bag, examining its contents with the intensity of an archaeologist discovering an unknown artifact. She picked up an apple, it looked like a cherry in her large hands, and turned it slowly, studying the play of light on its red skin. Then she did something that made Aaron's heart stop. She looked directly at him, held his gaze, and placed her free hand against the spot where he stood, palm flat against the floor. It was too far to actually touch him, but the intention was unmistakable. A gesture of connection. Of gratitude. She ate the apple slowly, her eyes closing as she savored each bite. Aaron watched emotions flicker across her alien familiar face. Relief, pleasure, something that might have been grief for all the meals she'd been denied. When she finished, she carefully folded the bag and set it aside like it was precious. Then she spoke, and Aaron's world tilted sideways. "Thank you, kind one." Her voice was layered with harmonics, like a chorus compressed into a single throat, accented in ways Aaron couldn't place. But the words were clear. Unmistakable. English. You speak English?" Aaron's voice cracked. "This whole time, you've understood everything?" Her ears tilted in what he would learn was amusement. Understanding and speaking require different courage. "I listen 8 months. Learn. Wait." She paused, seeming to search for words. Wait for someone kind. Aaron felt like he'd been punched. 8 months. 8 months of listening to researchers discuss her like a specimen, guards joke about her like a monster, administrators debate her future like she was a problem to solve. And she'd understood every word. "I'm Aaron," he said, because it seemed important suddenly that she know his name. "Dr. Aaron Reeves, but just Aaron is fine. Better, actually. What do I call you?" She considered him with those remarkable eyes. "My name is—" She made a sound like wind through canyon walls, musical and impossible. "Your mouth cannot shape it. In your words." Another pause. "Lyrian. Close enough. Lyrian." Aaron tested the name. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry for what they've been doing to you." Lyrian tilted her head, those long years adjusting independently. "You are sorry, but you bring food anyway. Action speaks louder than sorry. This is correct phrase, yes." Despite everything, Aaron laughed. "Yes." Dr. Helena Voss's office smelled like old paper and newer anxiety. Aaron sat across from her desk, watching her review something on her tablet with the intensity of someone reading either a death warrant or a grocery list. With Voss, it was impossible to tell which. He'd spent the walk here mentally composing his resignation speech and wondering if federal prison had a decent research library. Voss finally looked up, her gray eyes sharp enough to perform surgery. "That was remarkably stupid, Dr. Reeves." "I know. Violating containment protocols, unauthorized food delivery, unsupervised contact with a potentially hostile extraterrestrial entity." She ticked off his infractions like she was reading a menu. "Any one of those is grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal charges." "I know," Aaron repeated, his stomach somewhere around his ankles. "Good." Voss set down her tablet. "Now that we've established you're an idiot, let's discuss why you're a useful idiot." She pulled up a holographic display that showed the interior of Lyrian's cell from multiple angles. "Site 7 has full surveillance coverage. I watched your entire interaction in real time." Aaron's mouth went dry. "Then why didn't you stop me?" "Because I wanted to see what would happen." Voss leaned back in her chair, and something that might have been satisfaction flickered across her face. "Do you know how many researchers have tried to establish communication with Subject Epsilon?" 17, over 8 months. All of them followed approved protocols. All of them failed completely. She remained non-responsive, passive to the point of catatonia. Then you walk in with contraband produce and suddenly she's conducting comedy routines in English. "She's been listening the whole time," Aaron said. "Learning. She understood everything." "Yes, I gathered that from her remarkably pointed observation about our coffee." Voss pulled up another file, this one dense with text. "The starvation protocol, nutritional management, as it's officially termed, wasn't my idea. It came from DARPA, channeled through 3 different military intelligence agencies, all operating on the assumption that controlled deprivation would make her more compliant." She paused. "It's also completely unethical, scientifically questionable, and exactly the kind of short-sighted stupidity that makes first contact scenarios into first contact catastrophes." Aaron blinked. "You disagree with the protocol?" "I've disagreed with it from day one. I've also been systematically documenting every ethical violation, every procedural overreach, every instance of treating a sapient being like laboratory equipment." Voss's expression hardened. "But disagreeing with military brass while holding no leverage gets you reassigned to counting penguin populations in Antarctica. I needed proof that alternative approaches work better. I needed someone to break protocol in a way I could measure and document." The implications hit Aaron like cold water. "You manipulated me." "Extensively," Voss agreed without remorse. "Your psychological profile suggested you'd be the first to crack. High empathy scores, history of advocating for ethical treatment of research subjects, that unfortunate tendency to see individuals instead of data points. I had Patricia route you past the atmospheric testing lab specifically because I knew it would unsettle you. I scheduled your monitoring shifts during feeding times so you'd witness the inadequacy of current protocols. I even made sure the commissary would be understocked during your first week, forcing you to see the disparity between our food and hers. Aaron should have been furious. Instead, he felt a strange relief mixed with his anger. That's incredibly cynical. That's effective leadership in a bureaucratic nightmare. Voss pulled up a new document covered in official seals. Here's what happens next. You're being officially assigned to a new protocol, rapport building through positive reinforcement and voluntary communication exchange. You'll continue feeding Lyrian, yes, we're using her actual name now, another documented breakthrough, and you'll document every interaction. I compile the data, present it to the Oversight Committee, and we see if we can drag this facility into something resembling ethical first contact procedures before someone decides she's too much trouble and orders a more permanent solution. The last phrase made Aaron's blood run cold. They'd kill her. There's a faction that views her as an unacceptable risk. Colonel Dane Merrick, head of security, has been pushing for what he calls terminal containment protocols since week 3. Voss's voice dropped. Merrick sees threats everywhere. To him, Lyrian's intelligence makes her dangerous. Her size makes her a potential weapon. The fact that she can apparently learn languages by listening makes her a spy. He's been building a case for elimination, and he's not alone. Aaron felt sick. But she's never shown aggression. She's been cooperative even while being starved. Which Merrick interprets as evidence of manipulation tactics. To him, her passivity is a strategy. Voss closed the files with a gesture. You're going to help me prove otherwise. You're going to document that cooperation increases with humane treatment. That communication is possible. That she's a person, not a threat assessment. What if I fail? What if she, Aaron stopped, realizing how absurd his concern sounded. What if she turns out to be dangerous after all? Voss finished. Then we deal with that if it happens. But right now, the greater danger is that we destroy our first chance at meaningful contact with extraterrestrial intelligence because some people are more comfortable with cages than conversations. Aaron thought about Lyrian's eyes, the careful way she'd eaten that apple, her gentle mockery of his excessive apologizing. When do I start? You already have. Get some actual sleep, Dr. Reeves. Your next shift is in 6 hours, and you're going to need to be sharp. Lyrian's smarter than both of us combined, and she's been playing the long game while we're still figuring out the rules. The next morning, Aaron returned to the containment level with a backpack full of food and a head full of questions. Lyrian was waiting, sitting cross-legged in the center of her cell in a pose that looked almost meditative. Her ears tracked his approach before he'd even entered the outer chamber. Aaron who brings food returns, she said as he entered, her harmonics carrying an almost musical quality. And not arrested yet. This is good sign, yes. Surprisingly, yes. Aaron set down his backpack and started unpacking. Apparently my reckless protocol violations are now officially sanctioned reckless protocol violations. They're calling it rapport building. Rapport. Lyrian tested the word. This means friendship in your language? Sort of. It means establishing trust and communication. Ah. So now you feed me with permission to feed me. Much better than feeding me with just kindness. Her ears tilted in that amused way. Bureaucracy. 3 weeks had passed since the security meeting where Colonel Merrick had proposed installing what he called neural suppression fields in Lyrian's cell. Dr. Voss had blocked it by threatening to resign and take her documentation to 6 different oversight committees. The compromise had been increased monitoring and mandatory psychological evaluations for all personnel with direct contact. Aaron now spent an hour each week explaining to a therapist why talking to an alien didn't make him mentally unstable, which was exactly as productive as it sounded. But the real change wasn't in protocols or security measures. The real change was happening in conversations that ranged from quantum mechanics to the correct way to eat an orange. No, see, you're supposed to peel it first, Aaron explained, demonstrating with the fruit he'd brought. Lyrian watched with the fascinated attention of someone observing an alien ritual, which, he supposed, she was. Why? She plucked an orange from his bag and bit directly through the rind. This way is faster. That way is psychotic. Psychotic means crazy, yes. Lyrian chewed thoughtfully, apparently unbothered by the bitter rind. Then all of Earth is psychotic. You wear shoes that hurt feet because look pretty. You create light pollution so cannot see stars. You separate orange from protective skin just to make eating slower. She swallowed and grinned, an expression he'd learned meant she was enjoying his reaction. I think I understand your species now. You choose difficulty for entertainment. Aaron couldn't argue. He'd watched her solve a malfunctioning environmental control panel in her cell last week by listening to it for 30 seconds and then reaching up to adjust something in the ceiling vent. She'd fixed it better than the maintenance crew had in 3 attempts. When he'd asked how, she'd said her people learned machines by hearing their distress, which was either poetry or a completely different understanding of physics. Possibly both. Tell me about your ship, Aaron said, settling against the wall. They'd fallen into this routine, him sitting just inside the cell door, her cross-legged in the center, the space between them shrinking incrementally each day. You said it had catastrophic failure. What happened? Lyrian's ears drooped slightly, a gesture he'd learned indicated sadness. We were scouts. 5 of us. Mapping stellar phenomena in this region. We detected unusual gravitational distortion near your star and came to investigate. She ran one long finger across the floor in absent patterns. Something went wrong with our fold drive. Maybe micro-collision with debris. Maybe just old equipment. We dropped out of faster-than-light wrong, half in your dimension, half still in fold space. Ship tore itself apart. God. I'm sorry. The others? Scattered across your planet, I think. Or dead in the crash. I woke in desert, everything hurting, and your military found me before I could reach emergency beacon. Her voice remained steady, but her hands had stopped moving. Been here ever since. Learning your irregular verbs and eating gray paste. Until I showed up with contraband fruit, Aaron said quietly. Until you showed up and saw person instead of specimen. Lyrian looked at him directly. This is rare thing, Aaron. Kindness to something you fear. Most species, most people, they build walls first and ask questions never. We're getting better at the asking questions part. Slowly. Very slowly. Slowly is still movement. She tilted her head, ears adjusting to some sound he couldn't hear. Your Dr. Voss is outside. With someone else. Someone whose heartbeat is angry. Aaron's tablet buzzed a second later. Emergency meeting, his quarters, immediate. He stood reluctantly. I'll be back tomorrow. I know. Lyrian's expression softened. You always come back. Is nice, having consistency. Even in cage. The word stayed with him as he left, heavy as stones in his chest. Dr. Voss was indeed outside his quarters, along with a man Aaron didn't recognize, sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of face that came from either military intelligence or expensive dental work. Possibly both. Dr. Reeves, this is Agent Lawrence from Defense Intelligence, Voss said, her tone carefully neutral. He has questions about your interactions with the subject. Subject has a name, Aaron said before he could stop himself. Agent Lawrence smiled without warmth. Yes, I've read your reports. Very thorough. Very emotional. He pulled out a tablet. Tell me, Doctor, has Lyrian ever asked you about facility security measures? Military installations? Government operations? She's asked me why our coffee is terrible and whether humans really find reality television entertaining. I think we're safe from espionage. Humor. Interesting defense mechanism. Lawrence scrolled through something. You're aware that extraterrestrial intelligence gathering is a primary concern with any first contact scenario? I'm aware that treating sapient beings like prisoners makes them less likely to share anything useful. Voss shot Aaron a warning look that he pretended not to see. Lawrence continued scrolling, unbothered. Your reports indicate increasing attachment between yourself and the subject. Phrases like trust building and mutual understanding. Some might interpret that as compromise of objectivity. Some might interpret basic decency as revolutionary, Aaron countered. She's been cooperative, communicative, and has actively helped us understand her physiology better than 8 months of invasive testing. If that's compromise, I'll take it over whatever objectivity means starving someone for compliance. Dr. Reeves, Voss interjected smoothly, perhaps we should discuss this more calmly. But Lawrence held up a hand. No, let him continue. I'm curious about his perspective. He turned to Aaron with renewed interest. You believe the subject, Lyrian, is trustworthy? I believe she's a person. People can be trustworthy or not regardless of how many light years they traveled. And if she's been pretending? If this compliance is strategy? She's had 8 months to study us, learn our language, our weaknesses. What if the moment she's given opportunity, she becomes a threat? Aaron thought about Lyrian carefully folding her thin blanket each morning. Her gentle mockery of his excessive apologizing. The way her voice carried sadness when she spoke of her scattered crew. Then we deal with it. But punishing someone for crimes they haven't committed and might never commit isn't security. It's just cruelty with a better filing system. Lawrence studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed. Dr. Voss, I see why you picked him. Stubborn as hell and too ethical for his own good. He turned back to Aaron. I'm not here to shut down your project, Doctor. I'm here because my people want to expand it. Aaron blinked. Expand it? There are factions in government that see Lyrian as an opportunity, not a threat. First contact protocols, cultural exchange possibilities, technological collaboration. But we need proof of concept. Lawrence pulled up a new file. We want to move her to a better facility. More space, better resources. Something less. He gestured vaguely, black site in the desert. She's not being moved anywhere, Aaron said immediately. She's not cargo. Which is exactly why you'd be transferred with her. Full team, expanded budget, actual support instead of fighting Merrick and his termination protocols every week. Lawrence's expression remained neutral. The transfer was scheduled for dawn, which Aaron suspected was someone's idea of poetic timing or just bureaucratic efficiency. Either way, he stood in Lyrian's cell at 4 a.m, watching her examine the transport container they designed for her with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for suspicious seafood. His very large box, she observed, walking around it slowly. Like coffin for giant. This is supposed to make me feel better about moving? It's a specialized transport vehicle, Aaron corrected. Climate-controlled, reinforced structure, emergency medical systems. Giant coffin with air conditioning. Much better. Her ears tilted in amusement. You humans and your gentle words for uncomfortable things. Why not just say, we are putting you in box for 6 hours, try not to panic. Because that would be honest and we're allergic to that. Lyrian laughed, the sound layered with harmonics that made the air feel alive. Over the past month, Aaron had learned to read the subtle variations in her voice. This laugh was genuine, not the careful deflection she used when actually worried. She was scared about the transfer but trying to mask it with humor. He recognized the tactic because he'd been using it himself for weeks. Dr. Voss entered the cell with her ever-present tablet and the expression of someone who'd consumed her body weight in coffee. Transport leaves in 40 minutes. Security sweep is complete, route is cleared, and I've triple-checked every protocol because I enjoy redundancy and insomnia. She looked at Lyrian directly. How are you feeling? Like I am trading one cage for another, but this one allegedly has windows. Is exciting and depressing simultaneously. Your language has word for this. Bittersweet, Aaron supplied. Yes. I am bittersweet about giant coffin. Lyrian turned to Voss with surprising seriousness. You fight for me. Against Colonel Merrick, against protocols, against people who want me dead or silent. I know this. My ears hear many arguments through walls. She paused. Thank you, Helena Voss. For seeing me as worth fighting for. Voss's carefully maintained professional demeanor cracked slightly. You're welcome. Also, your hearing is going to be a significant security concern at the new facility. Remind me to discuss soundproofing. Is too late. I already know you drink terrible coffee. Aaron apologizes to vending machines, and head of security snores like dying engine. Some things cannot be unheard. Aaron snorted. You've been listening to Merrick sleep. That's either dedication to intelligence gathering or psychological warfare on yourself. Is punishment for being prisoner, Lyrian said solemnly. Very effective punishment. The transport process was simultaneously high-tech and absurd. Lyrian had to fold herself into the container, not quite lying down, not quite sitting, while technicians secured monitoring equipment and verified life support systems. She bore it with remarkable patience, only commenting once that she'd experienced more dignified travel accommodations while unconscious and falling through Earth's atmosphere. Aaron rode in the escort vehicle directly behind the transport, watching the sun rise over the desert through reinforced windows while trying not to think about everything that could go wrong. Agent Lawrence sat across from him, reviewing files with the intensity of someone whose job security depended on nothing exploding. Nervous? Lawrence asked without looking up. Terrified. You. Always. Lawrence finally met his eyes. For what it's worth, you did good work at Site 7. Changed a lot of minds about first contact protocols. Merrick's still pushing for termination options, but he's outvoted now. That's because of your documentation. That's because Lyrian proved she's worth listening to. Same thing, really. Lawrence returned to his files. New facility has actual windows, by the way. Full spectrum lighting, environmental controls, space to move. We even installed a small garden area. Figured if she's going to be there indefinitely, might as well make it less like prison and more like extremely supervised housing. Still a cage. Yes. But sometimes the best we can do is make better cages while working toward something else. Lawrence's expression was unreadable. Politics moves slowly. First contact even slower. But it moves. The new facility, officially designated Research Station Aurora, unofficially called the Greenhouse by everyone who'd seen the architectural plans, sat in the Colorado mountains, disguised as a climate research center. Aaron's first view of it through the vehicle window made his chest tight. It looked almost normal. No brutalist concrete, no oppressive underground levels. Just a modern building with large windows and solar panels, surrounded by pine trees and morning mist. Lyrian's transport container was moved into her new quarters with mechanical precision, and Aaron was there when the seals released. She emerged slowly, unfolding to her full height with audible relief, and then stopped completely. The room was vast, 30 feet high, open floor plan, and one entire wall was windows overlooking a mountain valley. Morning light streamed in, catching dust motes and painting everything gold. Lyrian stood frozen, staring at the sky visible through glass, and Aaron watched her ears tremble slightly. Windows, she whispered, her voice barely controlled. You promised windows and delivered actual sky. It's still reinforced transparent aluminum, Aaron felt compelled to mention. And there are 17 different security measures between you and actual outside. But I can see clouds. And trees. And birds. Lyrian moved toward the window like someone approaching something holy. I forgot what real light feels like. 8 months in artificial everything, and I forgot. She pressed her palm against the glass, and Aaron saw wetness on her cheeks, tears that caught the light like prisms. He gave her space, moving to the opposite end of the room where they'd installed what could generously be called living quarters. Actual furniture sized for her, a food preparation area, even books and something approximating entertainment systems. It was still captivity, still control, but it was so far beyond Site 7 that Aaron felt the ethical compromise in his bones. Aaron. Lyrian's voice called him back. She was still at the window, but her expression had shifted into something he couldn't quite read. I know this is still cage. No, I am still prisoner. No, freedom is maybe impossible dream. She turned to face him fully. But you gave me sky anyway. Fought for sky. This matters. I wish I could give you actual freedom. I know. Is written on your guilty face every day. Her ears tilted in that affectionate way. But Caliph is not about perfect solutions. Is about showing up with imperfect ones and trying anyway. You do this. Keep doing this. Over the following weeks, they fell into new rhythms. The facility staff was smaller, more carefully vetted, and actually seemed to understand that Lyrian was a person rather than a problem. She had regular access to outside time, supervised, monitored, but outside, where she could feel wind and hear natural sounds. Aaron watched her stand in the garden area once, face tilted toward sun, and understood that freedom came in degrees. This wasn't enough, but it was something. She taught him words in her language that human mouths could approximate, laughing when he butchered the pronunciation. He brought her books that she consumed at impossible speed, then discussed with insights that made him rethink things he thought he understood. They argued about physics and philosophy, shared meals that were actually good food instead of gray paste, and somewhere in the process, Aaron realized that the bond Lyrian had called Caliph had become the most important relationship in his life. One evening, 6 months after the transfer, they sat together in her quarters watching sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Lyrian had been unusually quiet, her ears tracking sounds beyond human range. What are you hearing? Aaron asked. Everything. Forest sounds, facility systems, your heartbeat doing that faster thing it does when you are thinking too hard. She glanced at him. What are you thinking about? That this isn't enough. That you deserve actual freedom, not just better